Okay, we're getting started here. Thanks so much for talking to me today, Julie.
Yeah, excited to have this conversation. Really important topic.
Yeah, so I, my name is Unny, and I am going to be donating my kidney at the end of December 2023 or the beginning of January in 2024. And I've had probably dozens, if not hundreds of hours of conversations about my kidney donation. But I'm really excited to talk to my friend Julie here today, Julie Knopp, who Julie and I, we have a whole lot in common, and we share a lot of values, so she's very easy to talk to and a dear friend of mine. But also, we've noticed that we have very provocative conversations and we challenge ourselves and we don't agree about everything. And I often leave conversations thinking, like, oh, I wish I had said this as well. And oh, I have a retort to that, or I have no idea why she said this or that. And so she seemed like a great person to have a thoughtful conversation about my kidney donation. And generosity is kind of the theme of this conversation, and kind of the questions of like, why am I doing this and what does this all mean? But I think, hopefully we'll hit on a lot of themes. Julie, do you want to say anything else about yourself before we get started?
No, I don't think so. I think your introduction was perfect. I feel like we get pretty passionate about our ideas, and that leads to some really fun conversations and meaningful conversations too. So I'm excited to dive in, and I wonder, would you be able to just share a little background about how this idea sprung up as kind of context for this conversation?
How the idea of the kidney donation,
Yeah.
or I honestly, I think that is the topic of this conversation to some degree.
Excellent.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
give you some background information in terms of the conversations I had, that logistically of like what happened, but conceptually is what I'm hoping that we'll get to in this
Perfect.
conversation.
Okay.
So yeah, and if there's something that when we talk about this that you're like, oh, I don't understand. How did you start to think about it that way, or what? Where did that come from? That's a great question to ask me, or
Yeah.
throw that in, because yeah, I hope we'll cover that. And I don't in this conversation, it won't be comprehensive and it won't answer everything, and it's not, I think that might be difficult to do, but anything that helps yourself and anybody listening understand, like, yeah, how I'm thinking about this and where this came from. Yeah, I'm really, those are great, curious questions to ask.
Perfect.
So should I start with kind of the background of the conversations I had? Yeah, so it was probably about 10 years ago. I was talking to a friend who was considering donating her kidney to a friend, and she didn't end up doing it because the timing just didn't work out. And I really understand that now, because the recovery process is, it does take some time, and you have to time it with the other person. I don't know what happened with regards to her and on that end. And she had a very demanding job, and so I could see how that could be just difficult to feel like that's possible. But I don't remember the specifics, but somehow I got this mistaken idea that she was thinking that maybe she was getting too old, or she was getting too old too soon, or something like that. And she's a little younger than me, and now this is like 10 years ago, so I'm much older, and there's people much older than me. I'm 46 years old as we're recording this, much older than me, that have donated successfully. So that was a mistaken idea, and I didn't give it a lot of thought or talk to other people about it at that time. So, and so I don't know how important that myth was that I had. Like, I don't know if it would have mattered if I, like, even if then I knew, like, oh, I could donate next year, if I would have really thought about it more. But I, uh, after that, I have a few friends who have donated kidneys, and I've seen it either on social media or heard about it from them, about their experience, and they're all very positive about it. And then that's within the last few years, maybe 3 or 4 years, and hearing about their experiences, I just had some curiosity about it, and uh, I there's part of me that's a little embarrassed, so I'm just going to say the specific thing, kind of like the trigger that got me to start going is a Facebook ad.
Oh, right. I
Yeah,
forgot that.
yeah. So there was a
That's so unlike you, by the way.
Well, I'm addicted to screens.
We all
and,
are, yeah.
Yeah, and time on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube those are like the places where I exhibit my screen addiction. But hey, this is as good as screen addictions go because I saw this ad for something about, donating a kidney, and I clicked on it. And it's actually funny because I clicked on it and then, it had this little survey like, are you interested in donating a kidney? And I'm like, and I just like filled out the survey. It wasn't very long, and then the next day or really soon after, I got a call and email from a kidney donor mentor, and I was just like, okay, I haven't even like seriously considered this. I have no idea. I don't know anything about kidney donation. And I said this to her before I returned the call. I was like, do you want to talk to me? And she's like, sure, we can talk, no problem.
Whoa.
Like wherever you are. And so I talked to her. I don't remember the conversation exactly, but yeah. So this was a little over a year ago. I can't remember exactly when. Maybe August of 2022. And then I started doing research, and like I said, I've had many conversations with people, friends, medical professional friends, people who've donated their kidneys. As I mentioned, I know folks who've done that. That original friend from a long time ago who was considering donating her kidney, and yeah, doing all that research made me compelled to go forward with this.
That's really powerful. And I think two things about it stand out to me. One, that we tend to demonize social media so much, but there really are some positives. As much as there are pitfalls and concerns, it's multifaceted. It's not black or white. And secondly, I like that there were so many different things that led you to this. Like there were there was the Facebook ad, there was the conversation, there was 10 years ago when you knew that friend who considered donating. And I feel like it just reflects some of the other causes we care about and how it often takes so many different things for someone to make a choice or make a transition in their life towards something that's more good or just.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And as I told you, I had some myth, a very lightly held myth, easily shattered once I just heard a little bit more about it. And I think actually all the people I know who donated that I heard about before I considered, that was all on social media. I knew the people in person. I met them all originally in person, but then I found out about their kidney donations through some social media post.
I'm guessing that's affected how you want to approach how you share about this so that it might have some sort of spark for other people as well.
Wow, I didn't think about it that way. This actually gets to something that I want to talk to you about today, and this is a very subtle, challenging thing to communicate that I can't really make sense of. And actually my brother kind of pointed out this contradiction, is that on the one hand, this whole conversation that we're going to have about generosity, I really like the idea of contemplating this and thinking about what this means in my life, and having conversations in community about this, and thinking about how do we all think about generosity and showing love to other people and showing care. And obviously, I'm doing this by donating my kidney, but I don't, in all the conversations I've had, as I've learned through this, it's like, I feel it's also a very, very deeply personal decision, and I don't want to say that I'm trying to persuade anybody to give a kidney, or even say that I think it's a good idea, especially not yet. I haven't done it yet. And so, like, maybe ask me a few months afterwards, but that this contradiction of the idea of inspiring people to be generous, which in theory might be part of what I'm doing, and also not trying to get other people to donate kidneys necessarily. And so, I'm having the conversations right now because it's my own process that I'm trying to tend to, like, how am I thinking about this whole thing? But obviously it's a conversation with people, You and I are having this right now, and people are listening to this, and it's like, well, they're gonna, you know, we're all gonna ask ourselves these questions about like our own generosity, and you know, and we're talking about donating kidneys, so of course the people who will think about it one way or the other about you know whether they should donate their own kidney or not, and
Well, I like that you're framing it in terms of kind of broader generosity, because I think while it might inspire some people to donate a kidney, there are just so many people who immediately will not be interested in that for one reason or another. But there's still this question of like, how can I be generous in my own life, right? How
right.
can I take that example and manifest it in other ways?
Yeah, definitely. And I think you know, I want to have this conversation in part because I, you know, you know, the surgery will be one day. I'll recover over some time, and I'm thinking about what kind of person I want to be and what I'm growing into, and how do I cultivate in myself the kind of values that I think are great, and um, so it's like it's much more than just about my kidney. You know, the meaning behind this is much more than that.
Right.
Do you have any thoughts about that contradiction that I was saying? Any more thoughts about that? Because I don't know how to navigate that or if I've addressed that well.
Well, say more about what you struggle with.
Well, the idea of trying to persuade people to give kidneys versus.
But it sounds like that's not what you're trying to do.
Right, but I think that it can come across that way, and I can understand why it comes across that way because I'm having this conversation about generosity, and this is how I'm doing generosity.
It's interesting because I haven't felt that way. Like hearing about it from you, I've felt like, yeah, I felt like it's been broader than that. I felt like it's about doing what you can to contribute well in the world. And I don't think that you would necessarily feel like that needs to be in the shape of donating a kidney. And I haven't had that sense from you. So I don't know. I just feel like even having the conversation around generosity broadly is just like setting the stage for not having it necessarily be about a kidney donation unless that feels right to someone who hears it and it sits well with them.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm glad to hear that you see the way that I'm talking about this, that it doesn't sound like that. And, you know, I'll just say it right now. If you're listening to this, I'm not trying to persuade you to give a kidney. I love this idea of having a broader conversation about generosity, but if you are thinking, you're listening to this, I am not going to donate a kidney, I will never donate a kidney, that's fine. You know, that's I encourage you to live your best life, and I hope that this, you know, seeing me be generous in this way and talking about generosity is useful in your own journey.
I like that. Yeah.
So one of the things that I, kind of a grounding part of why I think donating this kidney makes sense to me is that at some really fundamental level, this is the kind of thing that I need to make sure to say out loud because I need to bring it into the space because while I feel it in my heart, it's not there unless we say it, is that, you know, I think as a human being, as a person, as a part of this universe, that all life, all living beings, all of creation is, you know, I'm a small particular manifestation of that. And, you know, the molecules that make up my body, you know, come from the same place that make up all of the universe and all of creation and all living beings. And in that way, I believe that like I'm connected to and I'm part of all of reality and all living beings. And being generous is recognizing that connection.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And I think there's something really powerful in the fact that the donation, like, you know, you don't know who the donation is going to benefit. And I think gaining closeness in that kind of like donating a part of your body for someone you don't know, and then knowing that that part of your body is in them and benefiting them, I feel like could really cultivate, even in someone like you who's already reflected a lot on this, could cultivate greater compassion for like people who are unknown, for strangers, and just like those who we might not consider in our circle of compassion, but because of that kind of very real connection you would have with them, I could see that kind of facilitating some greater compassion for people outside of one's circle.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, that's a great way to put it.
Have you felt like this has had any like impact on you spiritually so far, just the process, or do you anticipate it will impact you spiritually in any way moving forward?
Yeah, that is such a tough question, because, you know, I just think that these kind of spiritual experiences, they're either some things that arise in the moment in a way that, you know, may or may not feel profound in that moment, or maybe a little bit later, and that's not something that I can predict or control, or it, on the other end of the spectrum, it's more of like a long-term contemplation and noticing about what is valuable, what is meaningful in my life, and so, well, I guess I've had that long term in the last year, but yeah, I think that, like, yeah, this is just an open question, and to get a little meta, it's like that's why we're having this conversation right now.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's like I want to bring that into space. It's tough because sometimes I feel like I feel a lot of pressure on myself to I need to do this, have this conversation, really delve into this to really make the most meaning about what I'm doing. And then there's part of me that hey, if I just donate a kidney and don't do anything else, and my screen addictions and whatever else I do that is unskillful or whatever, that's fine. I mean, it's I can feel good about just doing this one thing,
Yeah.
So, but because I've had so many conversations about this, way more than I need to just to give the kidney. That's part of why I'm compelled. Okay, well, what's the broader meaning here that I'm trying to learn about in myself and ask with other people that have come along for the journey.
Yeah, I wonder. I could be totally off base with this, but it just crosses my mind. You've worked in a lot of very complex spaces, in animal advocacy, racial justice, this kind of work. And for me, sometimes this kind of work can be challenging to measure outcomes and to know if I've contributed in a meaningful way. Has, plant-based eating advocacy actually resulted in animal lives saved? Or, kind of delving into those questions. And is there anything about this to you that feels attractive because it is so concrete? You know what I mean? You were mentioning about doing this one thing, right? Is there something about the specificity and the clarity of this that's appealing?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think all the things I do that are really that especially tend to be very tangible, visceral, bodily experiences that I think are contributing positively in some way. That is definitely I appreciate the clarity of what the outcome is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's definitely a reason to do it. But it's always possible to make things more complicated. And
yeah.
And one thing that the way I think about that is, in a lot of the systems, institutional kind of change that I'm really involved in my activist and nonprofit life, those are really difficult to measure. But just because something is easier to measure doesn't necessarily mean it's any better or more productive or good. And it's okay, if I'm helping this one person, that might be clear. But now I've spent this time and energy and resources on doing this one thing that I could have spent somewhere else, and that somewhere else, even if it isn't as tangible, might have had a bigger impact. I I don't. I'm okay not trying to measure these things. What I like the idea of being involved in different ways in generosity that, and well, maybe if I just do, I don't want to say just do a bunch of things. That's not quite right. But maybe if I lean in, maybe if I work in different areas of my life, some things that are interpersonal, some things are very interpersonally giving, and then very personal, like this kidney donation. Some things that are very much like system change and using my brain, like they just provide kind of different opportunities and different potentials.
Yeah, that's a great point. I appreciate the nuance you're bringing up because, obviously you could be donating a kidney to someone who's doing a lot of harm in the world, and that's not why you're giving it. Like it's I see you doing a lot of generous acts in a lot of different spaces. You love to cook for people, you love to do, or like you do a lot of, as you mentioned, like systems change work. And like, I think it's maybe not about like measuring how much good or not does the donation do ultimately, but more about the act of living generously, right?
Yeah, but it's both. I mean, you say measure, and even whether or not I'm going to measure or not, but thinking like, okay, this is good in this concrete, specific way to this person is a measurement, or it's like a substantial thing. But it's also, yeah, I mean, just as much, uh, like the uh, cultivating the practice, and I think you just said it better yourself right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how I phrased it, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So do we want to talk about anonymous generosity versus known generosity?
Yeah, I mean, you were starting to hit on that, and something that's come up, people have asked me about is, am I going to be in touch with the recipient? And the way it works is that after I donate, if I choose, and if the recipient chooses, if we both choose, we can be in touch with each other. And I don't need to make a decision now, and I think I'm inclined to feel things out, but I'm almost certain that I will not be in touch with the recipient. Because the way, yeah, I mean, this is challenging for me, but the way that I'm thinking about this anonymous donation is that it isn't about the particular recipient. I'm giving as a gift to the universe. I know enough about the statistics that the odds are likely that what I'm doing will be very helpful, but that don't know that for sure, and that's good enough for me. And I don't need to know the particular biography or have a relationship with them. And I think I'll be concerned that if I think the way they're living their life is harmful or not in accordance with my values, or I've heard some stories of donor and recipients having difficult relationships, and to be fair, this has been between people who know each other, but where the recipient doesn't show as much gratitude to the donor as the donor would like, and then that's difficult for them. And I'm like, I don't need to get myself into that kind of situation or anything like that. I don't think that's helpful for my process. But what I was saying is actually what's difficult about for me is this is not the way I normally operate. I am definitely somebody, I want to connect with all kinds of people, any kind of person I have things in common with, just always like reaching out to folks. So this is different, and I think that might be that's part of what's intriguing and interesting to me is doing something different.
Well, it's so interesting too because you're publicly sharing very widely about the donation, but yet the person who's benefiting isn't the one who will know. You know what I mean? So that's just very and you're just so open in general in your life that to think that the beneficiary wouldn't know who it was. I mean, I think your reasons are really important, and I think doing this huge act of generosity, like you don't want to walk away feeling like it wasn't appreciated or feeling like you didn't do something valuable, so I feel like it's partially probably like a kind of a self-preservation act almost. And I think that's wise and appropriate considering what you'll be going through in your healing and whatnot.
I think that, I want one of the reasons that it's helpful to get feedback in any way that I'm being generous is to know that what I've done is actually helpful, right? Like I said, the statistics and what I understand about the probabilities, and the donation itself, I'm going to be under anesthesia. Like
Yeah.
I'm not. I don't have any involvement. It's, the surgeons do all of that work, and whether that works or not is not my. I don't have the ability to control that very much. So so I think that sometimes it is good to ask for feedback about, like, oh, I tried to do this thing for you. How did that land for you? Did that help? To know if I want to continue that kind of behavior, right? But in this particular case, and maybe it's not, like, let's just say that I make cakes for people, which I don't do, but let's just imagine that because I went to, and let's say I've done it dozens of times and I've heard from many people, oh, they really appreciate these cakes. Then I could reasonably think, well, I'll continue to make cakes and give them to people, and I don't need to get feedback all the time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, just from what I know about this, it's like, okay, the odds are that people are going to like this, and I think it could be good for me to not always need to get feedback about it.
Yeah.
About whatever thing that I am doing that I think is being generous.
Yeah, that's a good point. Do you feel like generally the validation has typically like encouraged you to be more generous?
Yeah, it has. Yeah. Well, because if I hear that, if I hear it's really valuable, then that motivates me to want to continue to do it. Yeah,
I would think so. But you are getting positive feedback from people who are not the beneficiary, but I assume other people who you shared with and appreciate your generosity, even though they are not the individual beneficiary. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've gotten a lot of positive feedback, and including some of the people I've heard positive feedback from. One really moving piece was from a friend who has kidney disease. It doesn't need a kidney right now, but but she has health issues and she may need a kidney in the future, and said like really moving words about how powerful it is to hear that somebody's donating. And
that's amazing.
And I've gotten a lot of positive feedback. Something that's coming up for me right now, like in my heart as we're having this conversation, is that I have this concern that being so open about this public process is that it sounds as if I'm doing this to get all the praise that that I've been getting, and I don't. I mean, I can just say that's not true, but
well,
but I want to,
No, you go ahead.
I just want to like kind of wrestle with the idea and really, I guess, if there's something, maybe, I'm having a conversation with you. If there's something that you could see in me of like, how do I make sure that I'm coming here with the intentions that I say I am, and how do I make sure to cultivate that?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that stands out is that like you're having a major operation for this. And I feel like that's a lot to do for like social approval. I feel like that just stands out to me right away of like all of us want to be valued and appreciated. I don't think we'd give a kidney for it.
Extreme measures to get social approval.
Don't think so. Right? But I also, I think you've been upfront about like one of the reasons that you're sharing about this is because you want people to think about these things. You might, you've said like you're not encouraging anyone to donate a kidney, but you are starting this conversation around generosity. So I think being upfront about some of the reasons why you're being so public about it is really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, but okay, I'm gonna just press this just a little bit more. But like, as a friend of mine, do you see that are there behaviors or indications to you that my words are not in alignment with what you think I might really be believing, experiencing, or saying in terms of...
Yeah, absolutely not. No, I feel like I have no reason to think that you wouldn't be speaking in alignment with your truth. I feel like I know you to be pretty direct and sincere about what you think and feel. So That's my experience.
Well, I'll just put this out to somebody listening. If you see that, just something that I should be aware of, that um, for me to contemplate or think about in terms of, making sure that my intentions around here are really what I say they are, and how I can, how I can continue to make sure that that's possible. And I'll add that part of the reason I'm having a lot of these conversations is for my own process. Is that I've said that before, like, I'm trying to learn about generosity within myself, but also, I feel like a lot of these conversations are helpful for me to, just for the preparation for the kidney donation itself. I just, the whole idea of doing this just brings up lots of questions to me, and I just have a lot of curiosity, and I feel like having these conversations helps me feel like, okay, I'm, what I'm doing makes sense to me, and I can do this in a way that, like, I'm just I have more clarity about why I'm doing this and what this means and what this is going to be like and such, and what the recovery will be like and everything.
Little bit of an aside, but what's your anxiety level around it right now?
Well, it's not very high. I feel generally very positive about it. I do notice some, squeamishness around physical injuries and, cutting up my body. And, I'm curious as to how sensitive I am about doing that. I've never had major surgery before. I've never, really been very seriously ill. And, so I have some squeamishness and concern about that, but nothing. I think, like, if this stays the way it is, and maybe I feel a little bit more of it closer to the surgery, that'll be fine.
Yeah, it seems like a healthy, normal level to be at.
I was going to say the word normal. I think, like, I'm an average squeamishness kind of person, but the reason I didn't say that, I'm like, well, it's not really what the normal is. The question is, what is it like for me, right? Because that's the question that I'm asking here.
True.
And actually, this is a contradiction I want to bring up, is that people are telling me, wow, that's such a generous thing you're doing. And I do agree what I'm doing is generous, but so much of the conversations, so many of the things I'm doing is really just an intense focus on myself and what this whole process is for me and how I'm going to recover. And I'm asking so many friends and family to help me with the recovery process. I'm enthusiastic about asking help for myself, and because people are very positive about it, it feels like, okay, I think that people will want to give to help make this possible. I'm really depending on other people's help to make this viable. So that seems like a contradiction there.
I mean, I think it would be hard not to have that, just because you're doing a selfless act that does take a toll on yourself, to some extent emotionally, but absolutely physically. And it requires support. Like, I don't think you could go about this alone. You couldn't go about this without, like, requesting support. And I kind of love that the support is an invitation to generosity. You know what I mean? It's not the same level as donating a kidney, but it's like, as you request support for people who might care for you as you're recovering or bring you meals, it's just these kind of like mini opportunities for people to play a very small role in your big gesture, and to have a small, a instance of their own generosity.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's part of the process of getting people into the whole journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But do you feel like you should be talking about yourself less? Is that what you're saying with that?
Well, just let me back up just a moment. But I do know of at least one person who donated, and it sounds like they did almost nothing to get help with the recovery.
Whoa.
And, yeah, they did.
That seems unusual, though, don't you think?
They did very little. That does seem unusual. It doesn't seem like my style either. Not that I
right.
want to do that. And even if it went fine for them, but maybe I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's how I want to do it, though.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, what was your question again?
Oh, do you feel like you're
The
talking, like you kind of seemed like you
oh,
were concerned about talking too much
yeah.
about
I
yourself?
mean, it seems like it's hard to understate. This has been like a part-time job for a year.
Wow.
Just talking about this. I'm
Yeah.
not just talking about. I'm like doing things as well, but I've put so much time and energy into it, and yeah. So I guess I wonder about it a little bit. Um, but that brings us full circle back to this conversation itself of like, well, this is why I'm trying to have a more thoughtful conversation about it, to like reflect upon the meaning about it. uh, and Yeah, when I talk to people about this, and people, a lot of people have said, oh, that's so wonderful. I try to engage with them on their life as well.
Absolutely. And I think the first time that you brought this up to me, you weren't sure about it yet. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that those conversations you had with people where you weren't sure about it yet were part of the road to your decision to say yes to donating. And so again, like I feel like those conversations were more beneficial than just being about you. Like, yeah, you were talking about yourself, but this was towards, it ended up leading towards a decision to benefit someone else.
Absolutely. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So how does this connect with how you think about generosity in community and kind of how you help the friends, family, other people in your life?
Yeah, I think that you know one of the challenges about generosity in community um, is that it can be a way to really um, kind of show care in an in group, or some particular people who uh, that I have something in common with, um,
Hmm.
and that I think that there's a certain danger to that,
Mm-hmm.
of like some kind of tribalism or sexism or racism or something, where it's like, okay, just like the people that are like me, and this is an example of if I'm generous to one person in my community, whatever that community might mean, how that, like, okay, that's very measurable, but actually, this bigger picture, it might not be like the best thing to do, um, because the people who need the help the most aren't necessarily people who are the ones that I'm connected to.
That's a really good point.
And one thing I've learned in the considering a kidney donation is that the people who need the kidneys are often, well, they're very unhealthy. They're often marginalized. And the folks who don't have a friend to give them to, the people who don't have the social connections
Mm-hmm.
to find somebody to give that, and so those people, and that sounds good to me. The idea of giving to somebody who needs help in that way.
Yeah, I like that. I think, this is a little different from what you're saying, but I often think about this person who I dated a long time ago who was not involved in social justice in any way. And I was kind of like, huh, that's different, because it's not kind of the people that I'm associated with. And it kind of surprised me that they didn't seem to have any concern about kind of some of the causes I care about. But over time, I noticed that they were like wildly kind to everyone they interacted with. And it kind of blew my mind, because I was like, I actually think this person is doing more good in the world than like me and my social justice crew.
Yeah.
And it was very eye-opening. And I think there's something really powerful about the anonymous donation, in that it's so like, it feels very like apolitical. It feels like very like it's not along these kind of social, political, like intense lines that we've developed in our society that I think kind of restrain so many of us in unhelpful ways. I think there's something really like hopeful about that element of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. The kind of ways, if I'm doing community care, or in the organizing work I do, the social change I do, there's always like specific audiences in mind, or specific people that I'm working with, and that, yeah, they can be exclusionary variously, but the idea of just donating anonymously is like a way to connect beyond any kind of divide, And I
Mm-hmm.
really, I feel like this is like a tenet of nonviolence,
Hmm.
is that, we embrace and show care for everybody, regardless of beliefs or identities and such. And that's something I believe in, and I don't think I practice very often. And this is one of the ways that I'm doing that. But I really think that it's best to think about systems change, social justice, interpersonal care, anonymous things, all of these things as being mirrors of each other, of influencing each other, of learning, like learning ways. When we learn in one area, we learn to give in another area. When we cultivate kindness and generosity in one space, then we bring it to another space, and we notice what are the things that help us to more consistently and more often and more in more places and ways to feel care and love for everybody. And that's part of like the journey of living, to try to like live a more fulfilling life, and this is part of that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I love that framing, and I feel like it'll be interesting for you to journey through like how this mirrors to other areas of your life and the way that you kind of contribute to good in the world.
I got pretty abstract there.
Yeah.
You were tracking that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense. I also think it's interesting, going back to what you said earlier about how you want this to be kind of a, I'll just say radically inclusive kind of act.
Right.
But at the same time, you don't want to know who it goes to, in part because you have some concern that it may sit uncomfortably with you if the person does not necessarily share your values. I just think that's an interesting kind of juxtaposition there.
Yeah. So maybe if I was open to connecting with the person, and then I did learn this person is somebody who's very different than me, the odds are pretty good that that's the case, because
Right.
I'm kind of an unusual person, right?
Yeah.
And don't do a lot of conventional things. That maybe if I did connect with that person, that is an opportunity for myself to kind of deepen my practice of feeling compassion towards somebody who's very different from me.
That's a good point. And I also think even if you didn't know, it could deepen the compassion though. Like of just knowing like that your kidney could be benefiting someone of any political or social, background. And that could also, like open your heart more to certain kinds of people, just like ruminating on that. But definitely, perhaps more so if you had a specific kind of person in mind who broke down maybe some assumptions you had, or
Right.
yeah.
Well, like I said, I'm not committed to it, so
Yeah.
maybe it's something I can think about, and I don't have to decide now.
That's good.
But I guess I know what I'm curious about too is I'm like, well, is there anything quite like this, like donating a kidney? I mean, it's just different, and maybe that's part of the
Right.
draw to me. It's like such a curious thing. I mean, I don't know. Once I do this, I guess it's possible to donate part of your liver. I don't know all that much about it, and I think people have done both. But I kind of feel like I'm a one and done kind of.
Yeah.
I'll donate this, and then that's good
Yeah.
enough. I want to do something else in my life, but. What I notice is that like when I think about like cultivating this way of living, of like trying to learn to show love and care for all creation, for all life through this process, it's like, well, when I do this, then what's the next thing I do? And I'm like, well, what can I do it doesn't have to be anything like this to show to live that, but I'm like, there's something very particular about donating a piece of your body and having a major surgery and going into one person. That's very
It is very
seems,
particular.
it's kind
yeah.
of unusual. I don't know.
For sure. Yeah, there's nothing I can think of to compare it to. And I feel like even just what you were saying about this being like a part-time job, it's like not only has this been like a personal and kind of spiritual journey for you, but it's also like I'm just imagining you've learned so much, and like there's been a lot of things you've had to boxes you've had to check off to get to where you're at with this.
Yeah, I hope I've learned a lot. We'll see. We'll see.
We'll
you
see,
know?
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any particular thoughts on kind of just the idea of giving something directly from your physical body and that kind of interpersonal generosity?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think that like uh, I really like embodied ways of living. I won't say there's a contradiction, but some different ways I live my life are, I like to do triathlons and cook food and eat food, and I spend a lot of time in front of a computer, writing emails and communicating electronically to try to make change in policies of various institutions, and those are very different kind of things, and this is really that. This is like really on the very visceral, personal end of things, and so this is the way that I'm engaging with that right now, and I can't remember where I was going with this.
Well, I'm just interested to hear more about how this plugs into like your greater. You mentioned earlier about doing different kinds of. I don't know how you would frame it, but like doing different kinds of making different kinds of contributions positively in the community, like doing system work, doing, more like interpersonal things that are beneficial interpersonally. And yeah, I guess like how do you think about this in terms of the bigger work you've done? And by bigger, I just mean it feels like it's been longer term that you've worked on, kind of some of the justice and equity work that you've been involved with. How does this sit within that that worldview?
Yeah, I think what I was trying to say there is that this is an end of a spectrum of a way of living in the world, of it being very interpersonal, very very personal, very really about my body and giving a piece of my body away. That's like one end of it, and I guess maybe I'm experimenting with that end and seeing what that's like to to give in that end. And I don't earlier I said one and done. I'm like, it doesn't mean that I'm going to continue to give in these kind of ways, but maybe there's something here about like trying to live a very full life. And maybe what that means to me is that I want to try very different things in my life and not do things that are all just the same.
Yeah, I was thinking recently about I think there's been some research around people regretting more the things they didn't do than the things that they did in their life. Right. And I feel like, and again, not that everybody should run out and donate a kidney who's listening, but I do think like with your process, like at this point, I think I hope that this will be something you look back at as being part of living a really full life, and something that I think at this point, maybe if you didn't do it, that you might feel some regret around that, just because I feel like you've put a lot of thought and energy and there's been a lot that you've put into this so far, and I think it's meaningful for you as well as others.
I noticed that life is unpredictable, and things could come up between now and the donation that make the donation impossible.
Right.
And that that would be hard for me because I've been like growing so much, because I've been thinking about this so much and talking about it and preparing in community, that I might be having some kind of expectation about what my life is going to look like, and I know that it isn't wise to have too many expectations.
And it's out of your control to a certain extent.
Exactly. Like there's a lot things can change, and a lot of things that are not under my control. So yeah, I hope to have some humility about that, and
Of
what's going to
course.
happen in life is going to happen. One thing I appreciate, and I've heard multiple times from people who have donated kidneys, they said it is heroic and wonderful and amazing that you're even thinking about giving a kidney.
Hmm.
And maybe they're hearing from the same place of like this, the message that they should be saying out in the world. But
Hmm.
whatever the case is, yeah, I hope that, and I hope with all the conversations I've had with people that both the thinking that I'm, that we're talking about today and like what's in my heart, and then also the folks I've talked about that have learned things about kidney donation, that have thought about it and thought about generosity and what these things mean. That I hope that that's helpful, whatever ends up happening with the kidney donation. And I don't have any reason to believe that it won't happen. Everything is green light.
Right,
From where
right,
we're
but you
talking
never
right
know.
now.
Yeah,
You never know.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also want to go back to what you mentioned earlier about this being kind of a very particular or far end of the spectrum of the ways that you've engaged with community, being kind of different from some of the other forms of activism and other kinds of contribution. And it is really interesting. Like, I think about the ways that I feel like I've contributed, and so much of them are around like time and energy and even mental space, right? Like, especially in like from the lens of animal advocacy, how that can kind of be taxing on mental health. But the idea of like it being so physical and so like, again, like so direct and concrete is just, it's very different from any kind of like giving I've done. So I just find that interesting around
Yeah.
about what you're doing.
Definitely. Yeah. I think that you're pointing out those very dimensions.
Yeah. What else would you like to talk about?
I think we covered it, Julie.
We did.
Yeah,
This was a good
I
conversation.
hope so too. I hope that people appreciate it.
I feel like I learned a
Yeah.
lot of new things about your thought process, and I feel like it sparked new questions for me. So I appreciate it.
New questions for you to contemplate within your own life.
Yeah,
Not ask
exactly.
me right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Great.
Okay. Well, thanks for this, and I hope everybody listening appreciates this, learns from this. I think that you might have a sense about what I'm hoping for you in this conversation, just from the things that we've talked about here. And I want to invite you to give me feedback, ask the questions, whatever questions that you have about my process, to talk to me. And I'm generally open having conversations about this donation. Yeah. Any last words, Julie?
No, I just appreciate your example of generosity, and I really appreciate your openness in these conversations. I think it's rich. It's good stuff to explore. So thanks, Unny.
Thank you so much, Julie.